All right, let's dive deep into Joseph Stalin. Beyond the whole tyrant thing, we've got all these YouTube videos, different channels, different takes, and we're going to use them to really get who this guy was.
It's wild how much his early life kind of foreshadows his, well, brutality later on.
Yeah, it's like a roadmap to dictator almost, right? I mean, born Yosef Vissarionis Jugashvili in Gori, Georgia, part of the Russian Empire then. And yeah, tough childhood, abusive dad, the whole alcoholic thing, smallpox scars, and hold on, get this, public hanging at 9 years old.
9 years old.
Yeah. Makes you think seeing that kind of violence so young does something to a person, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Normalizes it, like it becomes a tool, a solution almost. And we see that theme over and over throughout his life.
Right. It's like that hanging, it's a seed of anger. That a lot of the sources called it a turning point. That's when he started hating the system.
Feeling that revolutionary path. But here's the thing. He was great in church school, sang in the choir, smart, disciplined, even kind of devout. How do you square that with the brutality?
It's like the good stuff got twisted, right? Instead of like a great leader, he becomes something way darker, and then boom, he joins the Bolsheviks. Key figure in the Caucasus. They're talking about him organizing these paramilitaries, robbing, extorting to fund the revolution, kidnapping even.
So you're seeing Stalin blend the ideology with action there. Not afraid to get his hands dirty, which, hey, gets him loyal followers, guys who aren't afraid to break the law, just like their leader, guys who become super important to his rise.
And he keeps getting arrested, exiled to Siberia, the whole deal, but he escapes every time. Cunning dude. Was it just drive or something more?
I think both. Driven by the ideology, sure, but also resourceful. Whatever it took to win, even if it meant bending the rules, breaking them, really. That pragmatism, it comes up big time later on.
So the revolution itself, a lot of the sources downplay his role in that Petrograd takeover, even though the official story later, they made him out to be some mastermind. So background player or playing the long game.
This is where the whole Bolshevik power dynamic matters. It's not just what you do, it's who you're with.
He was good at those alliances. Vorshilov, Budyani, these guys become essential when he's grabbing power later.
Long game from the start, always thinking ahead. So you've got chaos, revolution, then comes the Red Terror. Got to pause here. This was brutal. Political repression, violence, the whole thing. Lenin's the figurehead, sure, but Stalin, as Commissar of Nationalities, he's enforcing the party line.
What does Commissar of Nationalities even mean?
Basically, he's in charge of all the different ethnic groups in the Soviet Union. Powerful position, especially with everything going on. Red Terror, it's basically state-sanctioned violence. Anyone seen as an enemy. Blueprint for Stalin's purges later on.
And a way to create that fear, paranoia, right, that he uses later.
Exactly. And the sources, they give a glimpse of his cruelty, even back then. Ordering assassinations, former Tsarist officers, anyone against the revolution. It's starting to spiral.
Like a testing ground for what comes later. But it's not random, it's calculated.
Oh, yeah. Eliminating rivals, silencing dissent. The Red Terror, it wasn't just punishment, it was about control. Setting a precedent. And you can see the appeal for someone who grew up with the chaos Stalin did.
Then Lenin dies, the power struggle with Trotsky. Some sources even say Stalin was involved in Lenin's death.
That's a debate for the historians, but what's clear is Stalin took that opportunity and ran with it. Sidelines Trotsky, eventually has him assassinated in Mexico.
Ruthless. Calls his opponents enemies of the people, uses the media to rewrite history, makes himself Lenin's heir apparent.
Propaganda master. Understood how stories work, how to shape what people believe. Building a myth, an image that's, well, it's not the reality of his actions.
Then his policies, 5-year plans, rapid industrialization, collectivized agriculture. Sounds ambitious, almost good on paper. Reality was different though, right?
Human cost was huge. Collectivication, brutal. Famine, especially in Ukraine. Millions dead. It shows how ideology, even with good intentions, can go really wrong when you ignore human life.
Hard to believe he could justify that suffering. Did he think he was doing good, or was it just a power grab?
That's the question, isn't it? Misguided idealism or calculated move to crush opposition? Probably both. Complex guy, driven by ideology, but also ambitious, ruthless.
And instead of admitting his policies failed, he doubles down. Hides the famine, blames enemies of the state, saboteurs.
Turning point, right there. The famine, it wasn't a deterrent, it was like a blueprint for control. He realizes he can get away with anything, no matter how awful.
It's like the dam breaks, the whole enemies of the people thing explodes, justifies the purges, which we'll get into those in the next part of our deep dive.
And we'll see how that paranoia, that willingness to sacrifice anyone, anything for his vision that shapes his legacy. Dark stuff, but important to understand who Stalin really was. Back again, and we left off with Stalin, very much in control, but about to face, well, his biggest challenge yet, World War II.
You know, it's kind of crazy how Stalin's whole paranoia thing, those purges, it almost backfired big time during the war. He'd wiped out his own military leaders, made the Red Army like super vulnerable.
It's true. And that non-aggression pact with Hitler back in 1939 bought him time, sure, but ultimately miscalculation. He didn't see Hitler's ambition coming, so when the invasion hit in 1941, it was a blindside.
Operation Barbarossa, right? 3 million German troops just pouring in. The sources make it sound like pure chaos. Didn't Stalin ignore warnings from his own intel people about the invasion?
He did. Thought it was a bluff, a Western trick to force him into war. That distrust, even of his own people, it cost him.
The sources paint a pretty grim picture of those first few months. Red Army, unprepared, morale's shot, huge losses. There's even one account, this woman, she talks about seeing thousands of Soviet soldiers just wandering around. Their commanders had bailed.
Shows you the damage those purges did. So many experienced officers gone, the army's left with, well, not enough good leadership. And then Stalin, on top of it all, he's micromanaging from the Kremlin. Couldn't trust his generals, the paranoia.
Total control freak. But wait, wasn't his own son captured during the invasion?
Yeah, Yakov. Tried to escape disguised as a peasant, but the Germans got him. It's a tragic detail. Shows you the personal cost of Stalin's, well, his mistakes.
Can't imagine what that must have been like even for him. So how did they turn things around? Was it just throwing more men at the problem?
There was a lot of that for sure. Eastern Front, the scale of fighting was just brutal. But Stalin, he eventually realized, had to step back, let the generals do their jobs, gave more authority to guys like Zhukov, who was a brilliant strategist.
Had to swallow his pride, admit he wasn't the military expert. Was that the turning point, you think?
Big factor, definitely. But the Soviet people, they took her a lot of credit too. The hardship they went through, they fought like they had nothing left to lose, defending their homeland, determined to win no matter what.
Some pretty legendary battles on that front, right? Stalingrad, that one sticks out.
Stalingrad was the turning point, I'd say. Brutal fight for the city, months of it, street by street, building by building. But the Red Army won. Huge defeat for the Germans, and the whole momentum of the war shifted.
I remember reading about Stalin, how he'd use these speeches, invoke Russia's heroes, rally the people. It seemed to work. Was him being real or just playing the part of wartime leader?
Tough to say with Stalin. He was a master of manipulation, but yeah, he understood patriotism, how powerful it is, tapped into that, used it for his own purposes.
So, ruthless dictator becomes the hero who beat the Nazis. Quite the image change.
What are the big ironies of his life, for sure. He comes out of the war a victor, major player on the world stage. But that victory, it came at a cost, a huge one. And it wouldn't be long before his true colors showed again.
You're talking about the Cold War, right? Helps defeat the Nazis, then bam, he's a whole new kind of threat.
Exactly. Installs communist regimes across Eastern Europe, Soviet sphere of influence right up to the middle of Germany. It was a direct challenge to the West, and, well, it set the stage for decades of tension, those proxy wars, the whole thing.
It's like he rebuilt the Tsarist empire he fought to destroy, just, with a red flag instead of the eagle.
You could say that, ironic, yeah, but it shows his need for security, for control. Russia invaded twice in his lifetime. He wanted that buffer zone, a ring around the Soviet Union, nothing getting through.
So he wins the war, but the paranoia, the power, it all leads him straight into another conflict.
A conflict that would define, well, the rest of his life. Cast a shadow over the world for decades. And yet, all that power, his final years were lonely, full of unease.
Let's get into that last chapter then. How'd Stalin handle going from wartime leader to peacetime ruler?
Let's just say that paranoia, that mistrust that was so useful during the war, it didn't vanish when the fighting stopped. In fact, it got worse. Yeah, so much worse. It's like all that tension, all that fear, it didn't have an outlet anymore.
So he's reshaped the world, but he's more and more isolated. Kind of strange, right? How does someone that powerful end up that alone?
I guess it's the downside of having absolute power. The sources describe him as, well, consumed by suspicion, enemies everywhere, real or imagined. It's like the terror he created had turned inward, poisoned his own world.
The purges kept going even after the war, right? Not just political rivals, anyone he thought was a threat, even people close to him.
Oh, yeah. Loyalty. It didn't mean anything. One wrong word, one look, you could be in a gulag the next day, maybe worse. It was a constant fear at every level of Soviet society.
And his own family, it was falling apart too. His wife, Nadezhda, she died years earlier, and his kids, well, their relationships with him were complicated. It's like he couldn't connect with anyone. Oh, not really.
There's this one source, they call him a prisoner of his own making. He built walls, real and metaphorical ones, surrounded by people who just agreed with him, but totally alone, in a world he built.
It's kind of sad when you think about it. The guy who controls the fate of millions, but he can't even control his own family, all that power, and it doesn't bring him happiness or peace.
Makes you wonder what was going on in his head those last few years. Did he ever regret anything? All the suffering he caused. We can't know, but the sources, they paint a picture of a man who's lost touch with reality, lost in his own paranoia and suspicion.
And then, March 1st, 1953, it's over. Stalin, he has a stroke, dies a few days later.
Lots of rumors about how it happened, foul play, assassination attempts, that kind of thing. But officially, a stroke.
Think there's any truth to those rumors?
Who knows? Stalin had a lot of enemies inside the Soviet Union and out. But, in the end, how he died, it's almost beside the point. What matters is his reign of terror was over.
And the reaction to his death, it was pretty interesting, wasn't it?
You had the official mourning, the big show of grief, propaganda machine going full blast, calling him the great leader, father of the nation, all that. But underneath, you could sense the relief. Some people were even, happy. That says a lot about what it was like to live under his rule.
It's wild how people still debate about him. Some say brutal dictator responsible for millions of deaths. Others, they see him as the strong leader who modernized Russia, defeated the Nazis. Hard to put those two together.
That's what makes him so fascinating, I think. Even now, all these years later, he was a walking contradiction, capable of terrible things, but also, surprisingly practical sometimes. He was a product of his time, shaped by all the violence and upheaval of Russia back then.
So we've reached the end of our deep dive. What's the big takeaway for our listeners, you think?
Don't forget, history's never simple. Guys like Stalin, they don't fit into neat categories. They were human with flaws, with complexities, capable of both good and evil.
It's like that saying, right? Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's a lesson it's still true today.
Absolutely. And it reminds us we got to be careful. Protect our freedoms, hold our leaders accountable. Doesn't matter how charismatic they are, how much power they have. Because, the road to tyranny, it often starts with good intentions.
We've covered a lot, haven't we? Stalin's rough childhood, his rise to power, the brutality, his legacy, all of it. We've looked at the events, the people, the ideas that made him who he was, and how he left his mark on the 20th century.
And this is just the beginning, really. There's always more to learn, more to uncover about this fascinating and sometimes terrifying figure. So keep digging, keep asking questions, keep diving deep.
Until next time.